Welcome back to the Detailing Bay. In this episode, we're going to talk you through paint correction, and it can be a bit of a minefield, so we've got 2 episodes dedicated to paint correction. So in this first episode, we're going to look at how to deal with light defects, sort of light swirls and scratches. So Dave, how do you know if a defect is light or deep?
So your lighter ones tend to be like your wash marks, swirl marks, stuff that builds up over time. And you'll generally know they're going to be relatively light from the direction of them. They're very circular. Wash marring has like they're quite wide strips where they just look a little bit like the light's reflecting just a little bit, almost like hologramming to a degree. And yeah, normally they're going to be relatively light. In terms of correction, they're going to be nice and easy to remove. You can find with like sometimes you won't know 100% like walking up to paint always what's deep and what's light. You have a car, say for instance, you've owned it since it was new. It's 5 years old. You've never really followed any sort of safe wash practice, so it's going to have its classic swirl marks, and 90% of them are going to be light and easy to remove. But as you remove them, you will then start to expose maybe the deeper one. You only really find that out as you're correcting. The other side is your more random marks that you've picked up along the way. You've gone through a hedge, someone's gone along it with something like a metal, a key or whatever. And you can tell by the way light reflects, you can almost see like they have like a rough edge to it. And knowing what it's impacted into really, but it is quite hard to always determine from an amateur's point of view, an enthusiast, that, is it deep or is it light? Because that's almost like the age-old question as well and sometimes until you actually start machine polishing, you discover, how deep something really is. But generally, your swirl marks would always, and your hologramming and your wash marring, they'll always be the lighter because they've never had anything really abrasive hitting them. It's just a case of over time it's built up.
Yeah, so if we approach this episode then, someone's just got into detailing, they've bought themselves a starter kit with a machine polisher, a little array of pads, a couple of different compounds. What kind of equipment do you need? I pretty much just listed it there, haven't I? But, let's just run through the equipment that people would need if they want to get into the...
Yeah, so, people get mind-boggled by the amount of machines and the different ones and get really caught up in it, but keep it simple. You need like an 8 or 9 mil dual action, so like a DAS6 V2. Even though it's entry level, it's really capable and it is going to get good correction. So you keep it nice and simple, and your approach in terms of like compounds and pads, you'll look around and people are going, 2-stage, 3-stage, 4-stage, naming all these stages, and people get lost with it. But if you, dip your toe in lightly, start with something that'd be known as like a single stage or one-step compound. They're brilliant for beginners because you're going to get night and day results and it's not going to take that much effort. And also the beauty with using like a dual action is you're never really going to have a negative impact in the terms of causing issues. If you're going with like a lighter pad with a one-step compound, there's very little in the way of like negative impact. It's always going to have some sort of a positive. It might not get it to the level you want because obviously paints differ so much, and then it takes on this, is all the paint original? Is some of it been resprayed later? They all play a part in that end finish, but they will always bring it, better than it, than what you started with.
I think people get a bit overfaced, don't they? Like, what there's, like you said, there's such an array of machines, and there's all this language of, like you said, 2-step, 3-step, and it's like my neighbour's just got an Audi TT RS in black. And it's low mileage, but it looks tired. It just looks like it needs lifting. Nothing in particular deep looking. It's just, like you say, classic wash marring. But he's too afraid to even dip his toe into it because it's just a minefield. So, but you've just made it really simple there. That DAS6 V2 machine and a one-step compound. What about pad choice? You get a couple of pads in your machine anyway, but would you just go with a medium
with pad choice, just go with start off with a light polishing, because there's kind of 2 demons that put people off machine polishing. You got the wealth of products that are out there. Am I getting the right one? Am I getting the wrong one? And then you've got the fear of putting a machine on your paintwork. There's so many horror stories, and usually people that have never done it saying, you could burn through your paint, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do that, you're gonna make it worse. It's not the case. Obviously everything carries a risk, But it's, you know, these horror stories just put people off, and it's a shame really, because once they do a panel, they transform, they're like, it's addictive.
Yeah.
And that's when you also make that decision then as well, that you started off with your one-step compound and a light cutting pad, and you've seen the results you're getting, but you accept that, you know, if there's anything deeper, you may not be able to chase that out. And then I've had it where you get them other people that ring back and they're like, I want to do 2 stages. I want to do a more dedicated cut, and then I'll refine afterwards. And to keep it simple, there are times, especially with rotaries, where, you know, there'll be more than 2 stages, but it's not worth even considering or thinking about if it's, you know, you're just dipping your toe into it and starting it for the first time. 1 single stage, 2 stage is more than enough. And with 2 stages with a dual action on a car that's just been washed badly over the years is going to get it to a level which really is night and day.
I think most people would take like the odd scratch that's deeper, that you might need a more specialist machine, or, you know, that extra greater compound. I think most people would still take that as a win. You know, it's just like you say about getting over that fear of putting machine on panel, because it's daunting to some people.
Yeah, it's the unknown, and you have to, like, you'll speak to people sometimes and going, I want a polish to get rid of the swirls, but I don't want to cut the paint. It's like, well, if you want to get rid of them, then you need to cut past it. It's the only way you're going to get rid of them. The other way is to fill them, and it's just not as effective. And you do have to nurse them through it, because the second they realise, hang on, I'm taking some of the clear coat off here. I get it. It's easy for me to sit here and, like, done it 1,000 times and go, you know, don't worry about it. But yeah, when you're doing it for the first time, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It is, but
I was showing someone how to use one the other day, and by the time we'd done half a bonnet, they were already happy, confident, you know, little tips, cord over your shoulder so you're not tapping it on.
Yeah, it's all the little things, yeah.
You know, what pattern to go in, make sure you're not leaving patches and going some order. But I think once you covered those bases with the beginner, they're quite happy to. And then, like I say, night and day results that you get from a machine and a single stage these days.
Yeah, for tackling light stuff, it really... It can make it like a new car.
Do you think like things like depth gauges and specialist lights put a lot of people off as well, because they don't know how to use them? So it's just like more complicated.
I don't know if it's they don't know how to use them either. They don't realise that it's a thing. Well, you get that split. Some people don't realise it's a thing. Other people are aware of it, but they have discount because of the price, or they think, well, that's professional only. Paint depth gauges obviously come in all shapes and sizes. You can get, you know, like Next Diag do like affordable ones. Granted, they'll only do an overall depth, but that can still give you an insight into what you're dealing with, because it will pick up if it's been resprayed, if you've got fillers. But you can measure where it's going to be at its thinnest, so measure like a door shut, and then go back to your bonnet and measure the two, and it's going to give you a more indication on, you know, roughly what you're going to have to play with. Can go dearer and buy depth gauges that can do individual levels, and they go up in price the more levels they do. But you'd only need it to do like 3 levels, and then. But it's not necessary if especially if you know the history of the car. But like dual actions are such a gradual like cut, especially like 1 steps, that you're taking off very, very little. You know, them swirls aren't deep in there. And yeah,
I was just going to say, you're probably only just skimming over that top layer of lacquer to remove most of
absolutely. It's more refinement than it is cutting into some respect. I feel with lights, they definitely offer a big advantage. So for instance, you can have where, depending, if you're doing it on your driveway as well, or you do it in a garage that's not always well lit, can give you that appearance. Like there is some really good examples out there of showing the vehicle, and it poses as a before and after, and it shows this really heavy swirly car, and it shows it afterwards, and there's no swirls, and it's looking a bit deeper, and it's had nothing done to it. It's the same car in different light. And it just shows, like, it's an extreme example, but it shows how some things can hide themselves. So general swirls, sunlight's good, but it's not good to work in sunlight. So using like a focus light, like an LED, or even a halogen, that you can focus on one area at a time. So working in a darker area with a focused light, I find gives you the most, it will expose the most.
It's the most critical lighting, isn't it?
Yeah. So lighting is always good, but you don't always have to, like, you've got the, like, Scan Grip do the colour match stuff, which was for paint matching, so you do different colour temperatures, but it's also fascinating. You can, like, it on one colour temperature will show swirls up, and then you can rid it of the swirls and you can change the temperature and it will pick up other little defects that you can't see under the other temperature. Now, what's also worth remembering is 99% of the time driving around, you're probably not going to see these. It depends how much of perfection you want to chase.
Yeah, that's definitely taking it to the next level, isn't it? I think what you do want to avoid, even as a beginner, is spending all day machine polishing in a certain light that looks great, and then you take your car out for a spin and you're walking back to your car and all of a sudden you see in a different light there's a bit of hologramming. Or you're not really worrying about hologramming with DA so much, but any imperfections like that.
Yeah, we sometimes even with you get a bit of micro marring off the cloths, and it's understanding the whole process, and it is very straightforward, and using the right good quality equipment, you're going to keep everything up to a minimum. But there is always them risks, like I said, like micromarring, you're wiping down. You've just got that panel. Like you don't want to be getting it hot, but when you're learning, sometimes you get it a little bit warmer. You can cause sometimes a little bit of paint swell, which can also give you the illusion you're actually getting rid of more than you actually are. And these are all things that you'll read about and will start putting you off wanting to do it, but. A little bit of practice, mindful of your panel temperatures, back of the hand is more than enough. And yeah, you'll be absolutely fine. And if you want to chase it that bit further, or your lighting is really restrictive, you don't have to buy anything really fancy. Just, there are cheaper like LED style lights out there. Just give you a bit more focused lighting.
So you've done all your prep, which would include wash, decon.
And then the most important one for me is claying. You want to clay it because you want to get off that top surface, anything bonded. You want to be getting straight to the clear when you come to the machine.
Keeps your pad cleaner when you machine as well.
Absolutely.
You're not clogging it up with loads of filth. And obviously the tar and things like that as well. You do not want to be just machine polishing over tar, being lazy. Get a tar remover on. So we're presuming the car's being washed, decon, it's ready to machine.
Yeah.
What are the first stages? How do you load up the pad with the compound, for instance?
Yeah, so if you're new to it, and we'll base it on that, pick an area you're going to be most comfortable. So I've a boot lid or the bonnet are two very nice, easy ways to start with. Depends on the size of the vehicle, but to start with, rule of thumb is about 2 square foot area. Aim to work that. You want to tape up any areas you don't want compound to go, because the last thing you want to be doing is having to wash it straight after you've machined it. So taping the areas that you don't want compound to go, panel gaps, plastics, anything like that. So you come to your pad's fresh out the packet, so it's obviously very dry. So what I tend to do is, there's 2 approaches to this. You can use pad primers, which like chemical guys do one that's decent enough. You just give it a couple of spritz. So if you're using a pad primer, a couple of spritz, and then 4 or 5 distributed pea-sized blobs onto the pad. If you've not got a pad primer, you can prime with the compound itself. What I tend to do is squeeze the tube just so the compound's just slowly coming out, and I'll do loads of tiny little dots across the pad. Tiny little insignificant dots almost, just to help with the lubrication. Then 4 or 5 pea-sized blobs again onto it. Pad onto the surface, machine's still off, and I'll just push it around a little bit, just spread it. Stop any slinging off. And then just a quick whiz speed one. I'm just pushing it out just so it's all nice and well distributed. And then, you go up the speed. You're not going to know exactly where you want to go speed wise at first, because you need to get to know your paint. You've got to treat all paint to a degree like it's an individual paint. So I tend to go to speed 3 or 4. And that always seems to be a sweet spot for them. And then I'll do between 3 and 4 even passes. And then once that's done, you'll do a wipe down and you'll inspect the area.
Sorry, are you going in any particular pattern?
So what you want to avoid is like any sort of sporadic like movements. Keep it even, because you want the finish to be even. So if you're going to go top to bottom, then make sure you go top to bottom till you reach the end. And if you want to go left to right, do left to right. But keep that till you get to the end. You can do left to right on your first pass, top to bottom on your second, and alternate that way. And I like to do that. I feel it really ensures you've got a really nice even cut.
Yeah.
The more you work it and you get familiar with the compound and the pad combination in your paint, you'll find that where you're finding the compounds breaking down to a point where if you start with, say, something like Menzerna, which is a diminishing compound, which is, it's only going to have a cut up to a certain point, and you'll find you end up with like just this almost film left, which at that point it's kind of done its job. And then you just wipe away any residues. I tend to let it sit. If you've worked the panel a bit, just let it sit for for 30 seconds and wipe, just let it cool down.
What kind of cloth? I'm going right into detail here, but it's important for someone. Like, you don't want to, I wouldn't use something extra plush for that kind of thing. So
no, it won't, because it can be a little bit tacky sometimes. An extra plush will just start moving it around. So you want something that sits, quite a tight knit around the 350 GSM, edgeless ideally. Euro do some brilliant ones, which they do edgeless work towel. They come as a pack of 12. They're edgeless, I think, top of my head, about 350, 400 GSM. Nice tight pile, but not overly to the point where they're a bit too firm. And they just pick up all the residues. You can get inspection sprays as well, which will help dissolve any like oil bases, any residues, just to make sure. Because what some people do sometimes is they'll do a couple of quick passes, wipe down, and like, oh, it's made a difference. But some of the base of the compounds actually just fill in some of the swirls, so it gives the illusion. So yeah, a good wipe down technique is essential. Don't use a neat or a self-mixed IPA, because in that environment, it's just going to bring problems. Use a dedicated panel wipe from a manufacturer, even stuff like Geon Prep, Capra Razor, anything like that, because they have lubricants in as well. It's going to, IPA, even mixed with water, can dry the area out and can cause you to mar, which you don't want. Use a proper panel spray. And yes, so once you wipe down and then you're inspecting the area, it's what your eye can see, not somebody else's. So if you're happy with that finish, then move on. If you're looking at it and it's not really made much of an impact, then have a little look at your process. Maybe you just need to go up with the speed a little bit more. Remember not to use too much pressure. You just want almost the weight of your hand to steady the machine is enough, and you go through that. And if you're still not getting the results, then you have to kind of go back to the drawing board and go, maybe I need a heavier cut, and so on and so forth. If you're getting the results and it's absolutely perfect and you're happy with it, then you continue around doing that, sticking to them like 2 square foot areas. It's always, to a degree, a bit of trial and error until the pads hit the paint and you've done them passes. How often are you going back to your pad to reload up with compound? I mean, on an average size bonnet, should one lot of 4p size amounts do the whole bonnet, or are you going to do 2 or 3 times? Yeah. So what you'll find is, even though I say 2 square foot, again, this happens the more you use it and the further around you get. You don't, it's not like you've got to stick to that exactly. You will overlap a little bit. You get a feel for how far you can push the compound. 2 square foot is just a nice guide against 4 to 5 drops. So you push that out, you do that area, and then you come back to do your pad again, and you'll see your pad's a little bit more saturated now. And I tend to rein it back then and be a bit more stickler for going for about 4 then, them on, and then carry on repeating that process. If you're going to look at doing a smaller area, then it is as simple as you use less compound, because all you're going to do is, if you load that pad up with too much compound, it's not going to break down correctly. You're going to end up moving it around. You're just not going to get the results. Yeah, some people think that more, he's gonna do more, and it is not the case. You end up just moving it around. It's like putting half a tube of toothpaste on your toothbrush. Your teeth aren't going to come out any cleaner. In fact, you're probably just going to end up moving toothpaste around and not really clean your teeth properly. Yeah, that's a good analogy, is that one. Well, if someone does overload the pad, what's the best way to get back? You don't have to throw the pad, do you? No, wash it out. It doesn't even matter. A lot of them, the majority of them now are water-based as well. So run some warm water through it. You can get a little bit of washing up liquid on there, help break it down. Give it a little rinse out, give it a squeeze. I tend to take it outside and give it a quick shake. You can, even once you've got the majority out, put it back on your machine, just on speed 1. Let it spin a little bit and it'll flicker next. Yeah. But don't panic about the pad being damp going back onto the paintwork. It's not the end of the world. It'll soon dry out, won't it? It'll soon dry out, and it's not really going to interfere that much. I wouldn't recommend going down with a really heavy sodden pad, because you're going to have the same problem, and it's probably going to either sling off or damage the back in. But one pad should take you full way around the vehicle. Yeah, not without cleaning, though. I always say, ideally, 2 to 3 pads if you've got the budget, it'll allow it. 2 to 3 pads is ideal, because you can alternate as you go round. Each pad's getting a bit more rest time. You'll hear some people go, or use 6 pads, 8 pads, and people get put off by it. But you've got to look at the environment they work in. They're doing that because they can drop that pad and they're using a pad per panel. And it's not because they're posh and they're going to throw it away. It's because they'll clean all the pads at the end. The pads last longer. It's for speed. It's not enough to clean the pad out. But if you are going with 1 pad or 2 pad, then just get yourself a little cheap pad cleaning brush. And after every couple of sections, just give it a clean out. It's not going to get the deep stuff. It's not going to stop it being loaded up, but it is just going to get rid of some of that top surface stuff that kind of clogs the pad a little bit, and it does reduce the effectiveness.
Exactly. Your pad's still doing its job. Well, hopefully that has cleared up a few questions. And if you think you're dealing with a heavier defect or need advice on tackling them, then join us next week when we'll talk you through that process. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts.